Hello again, guys, it is Wtf 700. We are back with some Legacy of Kain lore. This time, what the fuck is the Melchahim? Now, the Melchahim is one of the arguably easiest vampire clans to fight, but if you look at it from a lore standpoint, they actually should be the strongest out of them all. So let's cover it in. Now, the Melchahim is actually the last vampire clan that was ever made, so arguably they got the weakest gifts of Kain's soul. This is very important because when Kain made his lieutenants, the guys who were in charge of all the legions, all 6 of them, he put pieces of his soul into each and every one of them. And of course, Raziel, being the first, got the greatest portion. And then all the way down to Melchiah, who is the leader of the Melchahim. And Melchiah got the smallest portion. Now, normally that's not much of a big deal. It's like, okay, well, he's still a vampire. What's the issue? Well, the issue is that the power that is keeping his body together is really weak and diminished. And it is in his clan as well, the Melchahim, where their bodies are decaying, but yet they're still alive. They're constantly in limbo between death and alive. Chunks of their body are rotting and slopping off. This is a problem. This is a very, very big problem. So, what can the Melchahim do about this? Well, the Melchahim would basically have to eat a lot more than the other vampires. They'd have to drink a lot of blood. But in order to replenish the rotten flesh, they would have to stitch on flesh from their killed victims after they've drained them of blood. This makes it where they look like, kind of like Frankenstein. They just look like a patchwork of skins. So it's not too uncommon to hear of a Melchahim who's got maybe one side of his cheek is really, really dark, and then the other side of his back looks really, really pale and white. And then, hey, his fingers may look green and gangrenous. You never know. So, this has led the Melchahim to extremely study arcane magics to figure out exactly how the fuck they can combat this issue. Because this is a constant issue. They can never really take a moment to relax like the other vampires. They have to constantly find flesh. They have to constantly drink blood, constantly replace their flesh. This has put them in a very, very disadvantaged position. Now, on the flip side, they also are the biggest vampire clan. It's been said that there's around 6 of them to 1 Terellum, and most vampire clans outnumber the Terellum 3-1. So the fact that Melchiah clan is 6-1 shows that they understand that their gift is really bad and really shit, so they've been mass-producing vampires in order to deal with that issue. So that way, if some of them die from the decay, they still have plenty left over. Now, sometime after the Raziel clan was pretty much struck low, the Melchahim discovered something interesting, is that by being somewhat half dead and half alive, whereas the other vampires are just alive, the Melchahim developed some interesting ethereal properties, like they can phase through walls, they can phase through gates, they can phase through the ground. This has been a very interesting buff that they have been actually utilizing a lot, is that they'll actually ambush some people by just burrowing into the ground, and when you walk over their graves, they just simply pop up and slash you in the back. This is, of course, very handy because in the later series in Soul Reaver 1, which is like a fucking few hundred years later, they're very, very slow, diminished, because there hasn't been much blood to drink, they haven't been able to keep themselves maintained, so they're just walking zombies. So being able to, again, burrow into the ground or phase through a wall has been very, very beneficial. But in the past, the timeline that we're more concerned about, like the clan itself, is made a very interesting culture in the Melchahim, where essentially every vampire is kind of out for himself on improving their body, improving their ethereal magic, trying to become closer to death by getting more magics related to death. They've actually got this special class called Summoners, where they can actually put, I guess, a bit of energy into skeletons and make them pop out of the ground and charge at the enemies. Or they could put a huge load of magic into one massive ghoul and make him pop out of the ground and chase the humans down. So this is where the Melchahim clan is really at. Their home place is even called Necropolis, as if it wasn't obvious enough these guys are already half-dead vampires. So it is an interesting idea. But there's actually something that's even more startling. This is the part that I like. This is my favorite part of the Melchahim. is that in Soul Reaver 1 it's not shown because there was gameplay limitations, but in the lore itself, the developers were talking about how the Melchahim realized that not only could they graft people's skin onto their body to replace their rotting flesh, but when limbs became damaged, when whole sections of their body need to be replaced, they found out that they could actually implant other people's body parts onto theirs and still retain function, which is actually really amazing. That's really fucking good. And it's actually led to the idea that the Melchahim are arguably probably the strongest. Because the thing is that if all the Melchahim's got to do is slice it off of you and then put it on his body with a few stitches and now he gets full capability, that can actually make it where you could take buffs of every vampire clan. Like he could take the gills of the Rahabim and put it on his neck. He could take the giant massive muscles off of the Torellum and put it onto himself. So he ends up looking like Morty from Rick and Morty, where he has this humongous arm and just starts clobbering the shit out of people. This is where the Melchahim's strength would pretty much be during the vampire wars, is that when the other vampire clans were against each other, not only did they have undead minions, which is actually very tough for other vampires to fight, because if they kill them, they can't just drain the blood because it's dead. And also that means that they'd have to deal with unlimited hordes of undead in order to get to the actual summoners and to get to the real vampires. Also, they're outnumbered because the Melchahim are dealing with kind of like a constant death situation, so they just mass produce vampires. And some of the vampires actually do come from the dead bodies, which has been viewed as disgraceful by the other clans. But it's really just a matter of what you view as honorable or not. Whether or not putting vampiric essence into a body and making it a vampire versus putting vampiric essence in an unwilling slave. The moral lines there is kind of iffy. But it's still interesting to know that the Melchahim are essentially never going to die off. They are the one clan I would say would probably never die, just because of the fact that they're always on the teetering edge of death, and they can always just replenish their numbers by going to a pile of corpses and just infusing it with vampiric essence and making them into vampires just like themselves. This is a very interesting idea indeed, and this would of course be very beneficial when it comes to fighting other vampires, is that, oh, you guys have amazing wall climbing capabilities. Let me take those hands of yours so now I can climb walls. Oh, look, it took 6 of us to bring down one Torellum. Well, let's just all start grafting his muscles into each other. So I have an amazing strong right arm. You have an amazingly strong leg so you could jump really high. The fun stuff. This is where the Melchahim could be kind of like a patchwork of other clans, and they would be arguably the most customizable. Now, and again, in the end of the universe around Soul Reaver 1, they are not displayed this way. Instead, you can tell the difference between a long-standing member of the Melchahim and a new member of the Melchahim just by how gangrenous their skin is. If one skin color is super green and super rotten, then you know that that vampire's been around for a very, very, very long time. If you see one vampire who looks pretty normal, still has a few like stitches and patchworks on his face, then you know he's probably a new vampire. Now, this has been it. This has been Free 700. I hope you guys enjoy talking about the Melchahim. I find them a lot like the Caesar's Legion in Fallout, where the Caesar's Legion Centurion armor is actually a patchwork of other armors of enemies he's defeated. So you'll see it where a Centurion may have a power armor shoulder, he may have a combat armor for chest piece, but his armor is just basically a patchwork of other armors from his enemies. And that's basically the idea of the Melchahim, is that not only are they going to kill you, they're going to take you what makes you strong and put it onto themselves. So this can actually lead to some very wild and crazy situations. It also reminds me of the video game Overlord, where when you kill a dwarf, or when you kill an elf, or when you kill whatever it is, a legionary, and you tell your minions to go over the bodies, you'll end up with like this patchwork horde where some of your minions have like giant dwarven axes, but then they have Roman Imperial Legionary heads. It's just a patchwork of shit that does make them extremely strong because they're so versatile, so adaptable. They can force their adaptation by taking away from the enemy what makes them strong. So, This has been it for me. This has been Free 700. I am out. I hope you guys enjoyed, and as always, comment down below what you guys want to see next. See you guys next time.